Today, we're going to talk about um, college. I thought that was a logical next step. The last thing we talked about was the history in Colorado, in Woodland Park, Colorado, to kind of give you a background where I came from, um, so you could get a sense for. I honestly I think everyone, if they plan, can retire nicely. But today, what we're going to talk about is colleges, because what crossed my mind was where we left off as I was talking about my commute to college, where I commuted to University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, see here, for 4 years and did it by driving 45 minutes one way and back. I didn't stay. I didn't stay at the college, and I worked. And I worked during that. So today we're going to talk about a couple of questions that I'm curious about. One is, how much does the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs cost today? With inflation and everything, could I have done it again? And if I was in New Jersey, if I had grown up in New Jersey with the state colleges, could I have done it using New Jersey state colleges? So let's get started. So the first thing we had to do, because that's one of the things driving whether you go to college or not, is how much money you make. So, like I said before, I dumped my Social Security records, which again everyone should do, and use that as a driver to kind of determine how much money I had, because I couldn't remember how much money I'd had. So what I did here was, this is the amount I made. And then at the time, the minimum wage is $3.35, but I think I was making like $3.90, maybe a little more, but not enough to mess up my analysis. And so what that did is that said, take this number, 8,000 bucks that I made that year, divided by 390, which is what you see in there in the Excel spreadsheet number. And that would have given me roughly the number of hours that I worked. And the reason that was kind of important is because as I was doing this whole thing, I was curious. And I took this inflation number. So if you look at $8,000, and I went into Google and said, hey, what is $8,000 with inflation worth in 2025? It may have been 2024. I don't know. I can't remember what it returned. And that returned me this number. So that returns me this number right here. So it told me that $8,000 in 1988 with inflation is worth about 20,000 today, which actually brought up an interesting question. So what I did is I went in, I said, well, what's the New Jersey minimum wage right now? And then New Jersey, because you always hear that, right? You hear, oh my gosh, and minimum wage is not kept up with inflation, da 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 da. So that wasn't the goal of this YouTube session, but I thought it was still an interesting question. So what I did is I took the number of hours I worked, which is this guy right here, which is amount of money I made divided by 390, and then multiplied that by the New Jersey minimum wage, which as of now is 15.49, which is a lot. But we won't get into that topic. And you can see that for inflation, when I asked Google, with inflation, what does $8,000 get me? It got me $20,000. But if I took the number of hours I worked, which was 2,055, and multiplied it by minimum wage, I made 31,000 bucks. So it's just kind of an interesting. Granted, this should be it. I never worked more than 40 hours a week. So it was just interesting. But for my calculations, what I did was I said, let's use what it's worth today. So what I did is I said, well, how much would I have for college? So what I said is I definitely saved my senior year. So I was saving in my senior year. So I added up my senior year, and I'm sure it'd be a little lower, but for this analysis sake, who cares if we're off a couple thousand bucks? I had a total of 85,000 bucks that really I had to work with over a 5-year period in order to go to school. So if we go to the next sheet here, what you'll see, what I did was, is I said, well, let's pull up University of Colorado. That's where I went. And then I went and looked up some tuitions and then put some numbers in here, which we'll go through. And I also said, let's just take, so my kids, all of my kids, well, 3 of the 4 and the fourth one too. I have 4 kids. Zachary is my oldest, then Dylan, then Jack, and then Ariel. So Dylan, Zach, and Jack have finished college. So I kind of added another question. I said, could I have gone the route my kids went with New Jersey colleges if I made what I made in Colorado if I had made it in New Jersey. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do in this YouTube session. Just kind of a fun exercise about college to say, could I have done it? Could I have done what I did then? Could I have done it now if I was the same age? In all four of these different universities. So mine was University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, which was a branch of the University of Colorado Boulder, but it was in Colorado Springs. It was primarily a commuter college. I didn't go to Pikes Peak Community College, but one of my good friends, what he did is, which is kind of a model today, if people are choosing to use it in our conscious. I think a lot of people just kind of it's almost like computers, and computers are first coming out. It's just college, so spend as much as you want. Hopefully, we're cycling that back down as kids are finding out when they get out of college they can't get jobs and they're in debt up to their eyeballs. But so one of the approaches is to go to community college for a couple years to get all your basics, and especially the state schools. Like I know in New Jersey, if you go to community college, they have arrangements with the state colleges where they have to take, I think, almost all their credits. So you'll see, even though I went to the University of Colorado for a full 4 years, I put in here just the Pikes Peak Community College just as an option. So you'll see my one son Dylan, who went into supply chain, he ended in Rutgers, but he actually went this route. He went to County College, Passaic County Community College, to get his basics taken care of, and then subsequently went on to Rutgers for 2.5 years to get his supply chain degree. So we'll look at that real quick. Zachary, who's my oldest, he's a mechanical engineer. He went to the New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark, and went there for 4 years. Now, what he did another route. So what Dylan did, commuted to Passaic County, but then Rutgers he couldn't commute to, he had to live there. So we rented an apartment for him for 2.5 years, and he went to school via the apartment. Now his over that time, and I couldn't get the numbers on this, over that time COVID hit. And so I had negotiated with the landlords because it wasn't my fault and it wasn't their fault. But I said, this is ridiculous. He's like living at home. But we have this lease, and they were really cool. So I think we ended up splitting the difference with COVID. They reduced the rent of the apartment. But anyhow, so Zachary, he wasn't there during COVID, and he was actually able to, he joined a fraternity. So he went another route where the first year he stayed at home because we did the numbers and knew he couldn't afford to go all 4 years on campus. And then what he ended up doing was he joined a fraternity, which comes with fraternity dues, but he got a much more reasonable rent out of it. And they had this really cool thing too, where one of the guys from the fraternity, when he graduated, he was a cook or something. So everyone would pay a flat fee, and he would bring meals for them, which was really cool. He'd bring like a week's worth of meals on Sunday when he was just getting started. So that was cool. So then we have Jack, who's my youngest boy, who's finished college. He went to Montclair State University and got a business data analytics degree, and he did a different route too. So the first year, he got a scholarship, so not a full scholarship, but we'll get into that in a minute. Is he for him what he did was he was on campus the first year, and then his second year COVID hit. So he got out of campus because it was just insane. Like all you could do is go get your food and go to class, and all the other times you had to sit in your room, which is crazy. So he was going nuts. So he was on the lacrosse team. So what he did was him and some other lacrosse players ended up getting a house um, away from campus, which is really a funny story too. Because he told me, he's like, "Dad, we're getting this house." I'm like, "That's great. It's going to be awesome." With like, I think it was 5 other guys, and I paid the deposit for it, and he'd showed me it on Zillow, but I really wasn't paying attention to where it was. So he called me up. They'd moved in. It was like right after Thanksgiving, I think, something like that. And he said, "Dad, you know what, you should come down and see the place. So I said, no problem. I said, give me the address. I put in the address. It's literally like 10 minutes from my house. So it's Montclair State is probably like, I don't know, 20-25 minute commute from my house. But his house literally was 10 minutes from my house. But at the end of the day, living with your mom and dad versus living on your own, even though it's only 10 minutes away, it was a world away, which he was really happy about. So my goal for this session was to just have like a fun conversation about college, but was also to say, you know what, could I do it? Could I do the University of Colorado again in 2025, or could I have not done it? So what did I do? So first I went out, I just used Google to give me the cost of all the colleges. So it gives you, and I'm only going to focus on in-state. Like, one of the things I saw on this was just the 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 price tag for out of state is just insane. So I'm sure there's people that need to get out of their state because good schools aren't nearby. But unless, I don't know, unless you're a genius, unless you're going to really hit an Ivy League school or something, I don't know. I can tell you, all my kids all have good jobs, and the one, at least the ones that are finished college. Ariel's still, she's still trying to figure out what she's going to do, so she hasn't mapped her full route yet. But going to these schools have provided really good jobs for them, and they were in state. So I'm going to focus just on in state. But you can see here the out of state price for University of Colorado is 20,000 in tuition versus 9,000 in tuition. So all my kids went in state, every single one of them. So that's how I got the costs. I went into Google and it would bring up the cost, and it was always the same, the same site. It wasn't like a different website, so it should be relatively consistent across the board. Like I said, it's a fun exercise, so it's not really, I'm not going to get down to too much details, but quite a few details. So let's switch over. Okay, so this is kind of fun, right? University of Colorado, the tuition for today is, I wanted to find the tuition in 1988, but I couldn't find it. So the tuition for today was 9,712. I just put a number in there. This is another interesting thing. My kids didn't spend a lot of money on books. They always told me they were able to get PDF versions and things like that. So I don't know. I mean, I spent a ton of books when I was a kid. Maybe when you were a kid too. We went in to the used bookstore and we're spending quite a bit. I think I had to buy a few books. Zachary had some book for engineering that was just unbelievable. I think it was like a $400 book or something crazy like that. But for the most part, they were able to get all these books via PDF. I don't know how, but they were able to get them. Um, so so if you look, yeah, tuition for 9,712. I got books for 750. So the real simple calculation, right, is just, hey, take all those things, add them up, multiply them by 4, and you get $41,848 that you could actually walk out of in-state university. Now, granted, you'd have to sacrifice and you would have to drive and not live there. But if you really want to get to school and you want to get out, and that was my case, my parents weren't giving me any money and I made too much money for Pell Grants. So this was basically the only option. I didn't want to come out with loans. None of my kids have loans either, but we did get some help from a relative. But so if you look at this simple analysis for this one, it was okay. I could get out of there for about $42,000, and I made, if you took up those 5 years. If you took up the 5 years that I made, actually I did 5. This was actually with only 4. So let's switch that. I made $85. So I could have easily, which is really interesting, right? I could have easily done what I did in 85 through 89. It looks like I could have, I mean, it was never easy because I was working my keystroke, but it could have been done. So, taking out massive amounts of loans, if you're driven and your parents don't have a lot of money, this is no Pell Grants. Like I said, I worked, but then you should theoretically, if you're in Colorado, be able to do this within state. Now, granted, again, I was commutable. It wasn't an easy commute, though. It was like 45 minutes. But some things, like you'll see when we get down into here with the New Jersey schools, like I just couldn't commute. There are some schools like I couldn't commute to Rutgers. It was too far away. There is one in Newark that's closer, but Dylan went to New Brunswick, so that was farther away. So let's look at that real quick. Is there anything over here? Nope. But that, not the funnest experience, not a fun experience with college, but you can do it. So the question you got to ask yourself, or the question we had to ask ourselves, is is college about the experience, or is college about getting a good education that can tool you for a job that you can, or a career, I should say, that you can earn a living for your family and for your life? What's the real purpose of those 4 years? Okay, so let's go down and look at Dylan. So Dylan took the route where he, and like I said, I put in their full history, even just to compare what they did to what could I do. And his total was, for Passaic County Community College, it was 7,590 to tuition a year. So you see, you do that times two, and you get this. And he was living at home, so he didn't have any food costs or anything. But then when he went to Rutgers for 2.5 years, which his timing was phenomenal, because he graduated right when COVID was over, and what was like the number one demand thing after COVID because of the big breakdown, supply chain. So everyone was trying to figure out, everything was just in time, and it was a mess. And so, lots of companies were trying to figure out how to adapt and how to start getting stuff into the country and get things moving again. So he found a really good job really fast, and he's a master at negotiations. But so you'll look at room and board. I don't even think I spent any books, but even if I did, because he was always getting PDFs and stuff, I didn't really have to spend much on books. So the $1,250 that we spent was, I had to get an apartment because he was in New Brunswick. So I think it was like, how much was it? It was like 11. Well, here I have it right here. I was like 1,100, 1,200 for rent, and then I gave him $50 a week for food, which which he was a master at figuring out how to make $50 a week work. But I mean, I could feed the whole family on 200 a week, so $50 a week should be enough. But it's probably a little bit small. But he was pretty tough. Um, so if you look at this number, you just take this number and you multiply it by 2.5, because he was in college. They didn't take all the credits from county to Rutgers, so he ended up having to go 2.5 years, or one extra semester, but that was fine. So if you look at this, that's 73 that he spent at Rutgers and 15 that he spent at Passaic. But it does show you that it would have been a lot more if he had gone all 4 years at Rutgers there. It would have been a lot more than this 88. It probably would have been that almost doubled, like 150 grand, which is just craziness. So if you look at this, like I made 85. Now, granted, the only problem with this model right here is financially I could have afforded this. I mean, I still would have had to take out some loans. But the reality is I couldn't have commuted to this school, so I had to go this route. So I would have had to, I would have had to have, taken out some loans, because obviously that $85,000 wasn't just for tuition. I was paying car, which, by the way, let's see. I don't know about any of you guys, but this was my luxurious commuter car, a 15-year-old 1974 AMC Hornet. But that's another fun discussion another day. Now I have a Javelin, but I actually did, the fun part of it was, is we found these rims in a field and some older car, and so we ended up putting like mag wheels on it, and it had a V8 304. It was a lot of fun. So Rutgers, it looks like I could have come in pretty close, but I would have had to have done go to county first. And that's a viable option for kids today. Dylan would tell you it wasn't a lot of fun, but it was good. It gave him 2 years to kind of realize what he wanted to shoot for. And then he ended up going to Rutgers, which is all these schools are fantastic schools. I was happy with all these schools. All right, so let's look at Zachary. Zachary's my oldest. He's a mechanical engineer now. Now, this school is in Newark, which is, on a good day, I mean, New Jersey, there's good days and bad days, but, and anyone in New Jersey knows, like, maybe 5 miles as the crow flies, but in traffic, it could take you an hour, depending on a good day or bad day. So his school, NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, is primarily like an engineering school. They do other stuff too, but they pump out a lot of engineers. So what's interesting is his tuition was higher than Rutgers, and they're all state schools. So these are all New Jersey state schools, for those of you who aren't from New Jersey. So his tuition was $19,000. So that's over 4 years, right? Now it's clear that I could have fully commuted to that school because he's in Newark. So I made like 85. I don't know why I have this here. A couple notes. We'll just delete this. 85. So I could have done it because it was basically 71, about 72,000 in tuition. Also, though, some of these schools like give a lot of scholarships. So he got a scholarship, but he had some problems in his third semester, and so he lost the scholarship. But he got, I think he ended up using like 4,500 of that scholarship. So you'll see in this formula, I subtract out the 4,500. So you'll see that like for 4 years is 72,000. I was very happy with that degree too. He came out with a mechanical engineering job. He actually worked before he graduated. He was working for an engineering firm. So again, a nice local state school, very happy. Now what he did, so obviously here is 71,500. I made 85. So I could have done that as a viable alternative, even in New Jersey, making what I made with inflation. I could have done this. I guess it would have been hard, but I could have done it just like I did in Colorado. So go New Jersey. Everyone's always like bad mouthing the cost of New Jersey, but I could have done it here too. So now what he did, and what for the most part, the first two kids did is the first year they commute, just because it's just too expensive for that first year. So he ended up Zachary first year he commuted, then he joined a fraternity, and so as a result of joining the fraternity, he got lower rent. We paid his dues, we paid his fraternity dues, and he got lower rent. So his rent, what was his rent? It was, what do I have? Food, 200 a month, and 8 months a year, 1,600. So he was, which is really a good price. Or was it this? Hold on. First year commuted, joined fraternity. Oh no, that's this, room and board. So he ended up paying 5,000 a year for for a place to stay, which is really good when you think about that. He was right near campus. It was technically a house that's $400 a month. And you compare that to the 1,100 a month that we had to do down in Rutgers. Then it was a great price. And then they did food. So I just put in here like a food budget. I assumed it was the same as Dylan, roughly 200 a month. And so you see they kind of come in close. Like it's interesting how all three of my kids did different routes, but they all kind of came in. And like I said, these numbers aren't perfect, but I mean, they're pretty close. I was looking at stuff, but you'll see they all three being in New Jersey kind of came out around the same number. So you could say I have I have 4 kids, but 3 that went to college, and their numbers all came in around 90,000, and they all took different routes, but they all stayed on campus in one way, shape, or form or another. So his came out 91. So technically, I could have done this, but I wouldn't have been able to afford the way he did it by going there. But I could have taken out some loans, but wouldn't have been any extra money, so I probably couldn't have done it. But I could have done the commuter option. So then my last, like I have a fourth, Ariel. She's just not sure what she wants to do with college yet, so she's noodling on that right now. But Jack, who's my youngest, he just graduated a couple years ago. He went to Montclair State University, so they all went to different ones. Montclair State is even closer than Newark, which is NJIT. Interesting thing is there's also a branch of Rutgers in Newark, but they don't offer all the degrees that New Brunswick does. So that I could have commuted to. He got a scholarship, so he got a $5,000 a year scholarship, and so which I think a lot of the state schools will get you if you've got a decent GPA. He had a really good GPA, but if you got a decent GPA, I think they find ways to get you money. None of my kids got Pell Grant money. I mean, well, they could. Let me rephrase. There's 2 types of Pell Grants, right? I think, but like I said, I don't know much about this because it never qualified. I think everybody can qualify for like $5,000, but it's interest. It's interest bearing, and then there's money you get as a Pell Grant, which is just free. So my kids, we never took any of that, uh, and they didn't qualify. Whenever we did the state aid or the FAFSA, that's what it's called. Whenever we did the FAFSA, we never got any aid. So anyhow, I don't know how I got off on that. So, but because of scholarship. So he got a 20,000, he got a $5,000 a year scholarship to go here. So we'll take that out. So their tuition, which was interesting, they are the lowest of all three state colleges that I looked at. There's quite a few other state colleges. I looked at it because I had my kids and I could actually see how much it cost and how much I spent. So theirs is 14,766. So over 4 years minus his scholarship, that's a 39,000. So I could have very easily done that route. Of all the routes for tuition, like this is one that it's probably only a 20-minute drive from my house. Granted, you have to pay parking, which I had to pay too. Now that I'm thinking about, when I was going to the University of Colorado, they were charging me a couple $100 per semester for parking. But this clearly would have been a very doable option. If, like I said, I'm not saying this is the ideal option, but for people who say, oh, you can't afford a degree anymore, I don't know. I think that's a bunch of crap. I think you can afford it. The question is, how much do you want it? Um, and how badly do you not want to have a massive loan to start your life out? So, so this was definitely doable, easily doable. I could have done it for Jack, just to kind of keep everything on there. The first year he was on campus, so that was 20 grand, which was insane. And and then he got a house with some buddies. So that house I had to pay rent on that house, obviously 12 months a year, so it's 590 a month. They had utilities. It ended up being like $100 a month. They all pitched in. I think there was a total of five of them in the house. And then roughly again, 200 a month. It was a different technique, Jack, since he was only 5 minutes away, as opposed to, I think, I don't know what I did with Zachary. I think Zachary, I couldn't have lived without Venmo. Like I was Venmoing everybody. But Dylan and I would just Venmo money per week. And then what Jack would do is Jack would just, since he was so close, he would just drop by and say, Dad, I'm going food shopping for the next 2 weeks. Can I have the credit card? And I would just give him the credit card and he would go. So it was kind of everyone took their own different route. And Zachary, I think I had to Zelle the house some money every month or something like that. Um, so that's what he ended up doing. And so if you look at those costs, this is per year, 590 times 12 per year. This was utilities, cable, $100 times 10 months of the year, because 2 months out of the year, they really wasn't even collecting it. What they would do, and there was no draw. You know what I mean? Nobody was living there. But over the summers, they would go there and have a good time because, like I said, it was like 5 minutes from my house. Um, and then I just calculated roughly the same number. I couldn't tell what his number was, but it was like 200 a month roughly. So you see his total came in, around it. What's interesting, they all took different routes, but they all came in around the 80, 90,000. But like I said, the bottom line, which I thought was really interesting for this, was, again, if you really wanted, and you should get a decent college degree. The days of coming out with a basket weaving degree and getting a job are gone. And then it gets even worse, right? Because none of my kids have gone in to get their masters. But then after 4 years, you find, oh, I got the wrong degree. So how do I solve it? Oh, I go back and I get more debt and I get a master's degree. When really, I think sometimes I don't know. It was always hard for us because these were never popular times, because we would go over some of these numbers with our kids before they went to school, college, in high school, and just say, hey, we're not going to let you go into debt. We're not going to go into debt all these dollars so that you can go away, unless you're going to Ivy League. But none of my kids were like Ivy League. If you can get away to Ivy League, then if one of my kids could go to like Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Princeton, I probably would have been like, we'll do everything to get you there. It wouldn't matter. But none of them did. I was, we're all average. That's what this channel is all about, right? Average. It's like, how does the average person do things? And for me, it's average. How does the average person retire? But here's an interesting thing on how does the average people, can they go to college today? And to me, the resounding answer is yes. How bad do you want it? So my degree was information systems, basically software development at the time, for business. You had engineering software developers and you had business school software developers, which is kind of what Jack's is. Jack has a business data analytics degree out of the business school because he's a really good communicator and things like that. And I knew he didn't want to do all technical. So he got his, so he did the finance, the accounting, but his focus was business data analytics. My last note on these things, because I'm about to wrap it up, is use the 529s.